August 12, 30 BC. Roman soldiers broke down the door. Inside they found her, Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, dead. She was 39 years old, lying on a golden couch, dressed in royal regalia, two of her handmaidens dead beside her. No blood, no wounds, no sign of struggle, just 3 bodies and a basket of figs. The soldiers searched for evidence. They found nothing. No poison bottle, no weapon, no suicide note. But everyone knew what had happened. Cleopatra had cheated Rome one final time. She had chosen her own death, on her own terms, and in doing so, she robbed Octavian of his greatest prize. Because he didn't just want Egypt. He wanted her, alive, in chains, paraded through the streets of Rome. But Cleopatra understood something Octavian didn't. She wasn't just a queen. She was a symbol, and symbols can't be humiliated, only erased. For 2,000 years, the world has told stories about Cleopatra, the seductress, the beauty, the manipulator who used her body to control the most powerful men in Rome. But almost everything you think you know about her is a lie told by the people who destroyed her. Because the real Cleopatra, she was far more dangerous than any Roman wanted to admit. She wasn't beautiful. She was brilliant. She didn't seduce empires. She built them, and she came closer to stopping Rome than anyone in history. This is her real story. Cleopatra was born in 69 BC in Alexandria, Egypt. But she wasn't Egyptian. She was Greek, Macedonian technically. Her family, the Ptolemies, had ruled Egypt for 300 years. Ever since Alexander the Great's general took over after Alexander died. And for 300 years, they had kept their bloodline pure. They married each other, brother to sister, uncle to niece. Cleopatra's parents were siblings. So were her grandparents. The family tree was less a tree and more a wreath. And by the time Cleopatra was born, the dynasty was collapsing. Egypt was bankrupt. Rome was circling. The Ptolemies were fighting each other for scraps. Cleopatra had several older siblings. She wasn't supposed to matter, but one by one they disappeared, murdered, exiled, executed. Royal politics in the Ptolemaic court made Game of Thrones look like a children's show. And Cleopatra learned early. Survival requires ruthlessness. When she was 18, her father died. His will said Cleopatra and her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, would rule together, co-rulers, as husband and wife. Yes, her brother. He was 10 years old. But Cleopatra had no intention of sharing power with a child. Within months, she had sidelined him completely. She removed his name from official documents, stopped putting his face on coins. She ruled alone, and that terrified the men around her. Because women weren't supposed to rule. Not really. Even in Egypt, where female pharaohs had existed before, they were exceptions. Anomalies. But Cleopatra didn't act like an exception. She acted like she was born to rule. And the powerful men in her brother's court decided she had to go. So they staged a coup. In 48 BC, Cleopatra was forced to flee Alexandria. She escaped to Syria, raised an army, and prepared to take back her throne. But she had a problem. Her brother's advisors had the support of Rome. Or at least they thought they did. Because at that exact moment, something unexpected happened. Julius Caesar arrived in Egypt, and Cleopatra saw an opportunity. Here's where the legend begins. According to the story, Cleopatra had herself smuggled into Caesar's chambers, rolled up in a carpet, or a linen sack, depending on which version you believe. She was unveiled at Caesar's feet, and he was instantly captivated by her beauty, her charm, her seductive power. It's a great story. It's also probably bullshit. First of all, Cleopatra wasn't considered beautiful. We have coins with her face on them, contemporary busts, descriptions. She had a prominent nose, a strong chin, a sharp profile, not ugly, but not the stunning beauty Hollywood wants you to believe. Even Plutarch, who wrote about her decades later, admitted her appearance was not incomparable. So what did Caesar see in her? Simple. She spoke. Cleopatra spoke 9 languages: Egyptian, Greek, Latin, Hebrew, Aramaic, and several others. She was the first Ptolemaic ruler in 300 years who bothered to learn Egyptian. Her ancestors had ruled Egypt without ever speaking to Egyptians. But Cleopatra understood something they didn't. Power isn't just military. It's cultural, linguistic, symbolic. And when she spoke to Caesar, she didn't flirt. She negotiated. She told him about Egypt's wealth, its grain supplies, its strategic position. She explained why backing her was in Rome's interest. She made herself indispensable. And Caesar, who was in Egypt chasing his rival Pompey, saw the opportunity too. Egypt was rich. Rome needed money. Cleopatra was smart, ruthless, and had a legitimate claim to the throne. So Caesar backed her. Not because she seduced him, because she was useful. Together, they defeated her brother's forces. Ptolemy XIII drowned in the Nile during the battle. Cleopatra took back her throne. And yes, she and Caesar became lovers. But it wasn't about passion. It was about power. Cleopatra needed Rome's protection. Caesar needed Egypt's resources. Their relationship was transactional. In 47 BC, Cleopatra gave birth to a son. She named him Ptolemy Caesar. Little Caesar. The Romans called him Caesarion. And suddenly, everything changed. Because if Caesar acknowledged this boy as his son, Egypt and Rome would be linked by blood. Cleopatra's child would have a claim to both thrones. And that made her dangerous. Not to Caesar, to everyone else in Rome. Caesar brought Cleopatra to Rome. She lived in his villa across the Tiber, hosted lavish parties. And the Roman elite hated her. They called her a foreign whore, an Eastern sorceress. They said she was corrupting Caesar, turning him into a tyrant. Because Caesar was changing. He was consolidating power, taking titles, acting more like a king than a consul. And Rome had a very specific rule about kings. Now, on March 15, 44 BC, a group of senators stabbed Julius Caesar to death. 23 knife wounds. They did it in the name of the Republic. But really, they did it because Caesar had become too powerful. And Cleopatra? She was part of that power. The senators saw her as a threat, a foreign influence. So when Caesar died, Cleopatra fled Rome immediately. She took her son and sailed back to Egypt. And she waited, because she knew Rome wasn't done tearing itself apart. Caesar's death triggered a civil war. His assassins, his allies, his heir, everyone fighting for control. And in the chaos, 3 men emerged on top. Octavian, Caesar's adopted son. Lepidus, powerful general. And Mark Antony, Caesar's closest friend. They formed the Second Triumvirate, divided Rome between them. And Antony got the East, which meant he got Egypt, which meant he got Cleopatra. In 41 BC, Antony summoned Cleopatra to meet him in Tarsus. He wanted Egypt's wealth to fund his military campaigns. And Cleopatra knew she had to impress him. So she arrived on a golden barge, dressed as the goddess Isis, purple sails, silver oars, perfumed smoke drifting across the water. It was theater, pure propaganda, and it worked. But again, this wasn't about seduction. Antony was a soldier, politician, pragmatist. He didn't fall for Cleopatra because she was beautiful. He allied with her because she was powerful. Egypt was the richest kingdom in the Mediterranean. It had grain, gold, ships, and Cleopatra was willing to share it. In exchange for Roman protection, for legitimacy, for survival. So they made a deal. And yes, they became lovers. Cleopatra gave birth to twins in 40 BC, a boy and a girl, and later a third child. She and Antony ruled the Eastern Mediterranean together. They called themselves the new Isis and Osiris, divine rulers. They held ceremonies where Antony gave Cleopatra territories, parts of the Roman Empire, Syria, Cyprus, parts of modern-day Turkey. He crowned her Queen of Kings. And in Rome, Octavian was watching, because Antony wasn't just allying with Egypt. He was abandoning Rome. He divorced his Roman wife, Octavia, Octavian's sister. He started dressing like an Eastern king, speaking Greek, adopting Egyptian customs, and worst of all, he recognized Caesarion as Caesar's legitimate son, which meant Caesarion had a better claim to Caesar's legacy than Octavian. That was unforgivable. Octavian declared war, not on Antony. That would look like a civil war. On Cleopatra. He called her a foreign threat, a danger to Rome. He said she was a witch who had seduced Antony, corrupted him. He said she planned to rule Rome from Alexandria. None of it was true, but it didn't matter, because Octavian understood propaganda better than anyone, and he painted Cleopatra as the enemy. September 2nd, 31 BC. The fleets met off the coast of Actium, Greece. Antony and Cleopatra commanded over 200 ships. Octavian had more, smaller, faster vessels. The battle was chaos, fire, ramming, boarding, and in the middle of it, Cleopatra made a decision. She turned her ships and sailed away. Antony saw her leaving, and he followed, abandoning his fleet, his soldiers, his battle. It was the end. Octavian's forces won, easily, and Antony's reputation was destroyed. The great general had run, chasing after a woman. That's how Rome told the story. But here's the truth. Cleopatra didn't flee out of cowardice. She saw the battle was lost. Staying would accomplish nothing. So she saved her treasury, her ships, her resources. She was thinking strategically. But Antony's decision to follow her? That was emotional, and it cost him everything. They retreated to Alexandria. For months they tried to negotiate, tried to find allies, but Octavian was coming. In August 30th BC, his army reached Egypt. Antony's remaining forces deserted him, and when he heard a rumor that Cleopatra was dead, he stabbed himself. The rumor was false, but by the time Cleopatra reached him, he was dying. She held him as he bled out, and she knew what came next. Octavian offered Cleopatra mercy. If she surrendered, if she came to Rome, she would live. Her children would live. But she would be paraded, displayed, humiliated. A captive queen in golden chains. A trophy for Octavian's triumph. Cleopatra knew what that meant. She had seen it before. Captive royalty dragged through Roman streets. Mocked, broken. She refused. For days she negotiated, trying to buy time, trying to find a way out. But Octavian wouldn't budge. So Cleopatra made arrangements. She sent letters, said her goodbyes, and on August 12th, she dressed in her finest robes. She lay down on a golden couch, and she died. The official story is that she used an ASP, a venomous snake, smuggled in with a basket of figs. But that's probably myth too, because no one found a snake. No bite marks were recorded. And ASP venom doesn't kill quickly or peacefully. More likely, she used poison. Something quick, painless. Something she had tested on prisoners to make sure it worked. Because Cleopatra was a scientist. She wrote books on medicine, on cosmetics, on weights and measures. She understood chemistry. And she understood that if she was going to die, it had to be on her terms. Not Rome's. Octavian won. He took Egypt, made it a Roman province, and he ordered Cleopatra's son, Caesarion, killed. The boy was 17. He had done nothing, but he was Caesar's son, a rival, so Octavian had him murdered. Cleopatra's other children were taken to Rome. Raised by Octavian's sister, they disappeared from history, and Octavian became Augustus, the first Roman emperor. Then he started rewriting the story. He commissioned poets, historians, playwrights, and they all told the same version. Cleopatra was a seductress, a manipulator, a foreign temptress who corrupted Roman men. She was dangerous not because of her mind, but because of her body. It was character assassination, and it worked. For 2,000 years, that's the story we've told. Shakespeare wrote her as a tragic lover. Hollywood cast Elizabeth Taylor, dripping in jewels and eyeliner. Every depiction focuses on her beauty, her sexuality, her relationships with men. but almost none focus on what actually made her powerful. Her intelligence, her political skill, her ability to hold Egypt together for 21 years in a collapsing world. Cleopatra spoke 9 languages. She wrote books. She commanded armies. She ruled one of the richest kingdoms on earth. And she nearly stopped Rome. If Actium had gone differently, if Antony hadn't followed her, if Octavian had lost, Egypt might have become the dominant Mediterranean power. Rome might have been the footnote, but she lost, and the winners wrote her as a villain, a cautionary tale about the dangers of foreign women, about seduction and corruption. But the truth is simpler. Cleopatra was a brilliant ruler in an impossible situation. She played the only cards she had, and she played them better than almost anyone. Cleopatra's death ended 3,000 years of pharaonic rule in Egypt. She was the last. After her, Egypt became Roman, then Byzantine, then Arab. The language changed, the religion changed, the culture changed, and Cleopatra became a legend. But not the legend she deserved. Because here's what they don't tell you. Cleopatra kept Egypt independent for 2 decades longer than it should have survived. She negotiated with the greatest military power on earth, and held her own. She built libraries, funded scholars, turned Alexandria into the intellectual center of the world. And when she knew she couldn't win, she chose her own death. She died a pharaoh, not a captive. That choice echoed. For centuries after, rulers facing defeat remembered Cleopatra. They remembered that surrender isn't the only option, that dignity matters, even in death, especially in death. But Octavian's propaganda was too strong. The story of the seductress stuck, and the story of the strategist faded. For 2,000 years, we've reduced Cleopatra to her relationships with men. Caesar, Antony, as if her entire existence was defined by who she slept with. But she ruled longer than Caesar lived. She controlled more wealth than Antony ever did. She was a polymath, a diplomat, a survivor, and she deserves to be remembered as more than a footnote in Roman history. Today, we're starting to reclaim her story. Historians are pushing back against the Roman propaganda. Archaeologists are searching for her tomb, her palace, her truth, but she's still buried, under centuries of myth. And maybe that's fitting, because Cleopatra understood symbols. She understood that how you're remembered matters more than how you lived. And in the end, she made sure she'd be remembered, not as Octavian's captive, not as Rome's trophy, but as Egypt's last queen, who chose death over humiliation, who refused to kneel, who looked at the most powerful empire in history and said, "No." Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh of Egypt, dead at 39, killed by Rome's ambition, or by her own hand, depending on who's telling the story.